I'd like to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission meeting. May we have the first item?
We have roll call. Commissioner Sahakian is absent. Commissioner Kirkjian. Commissioner Pro Tem Yakubian.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Barostef. Thank you. At 1B, we have the flag salute.
Very good. Will you please join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. What's the next item?
At 2, we have the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, August 25th, 2014 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, August 22nd, 2014, before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Very good. Next.
At 3, we have the approval of minutes for the June 23rd, 2014 regular meeting.
Do we have any comments, corrections for that? Do I hear a motion to move the minutes?
I'll second.
Very good. Next item.
At 4, we have oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
Thank you. And I have Erica Camp, please.
All right, thank you. My name is Erica Camp. I'm with Go Glendale, which is the Glendale Transportation Management Association, and I'm here to update the Commission on a grant project that we've been working on and that I want to let you know about and see how we can, if I can answer any questions or see how we can work together on it. So if you have this Go Verdugo packet, I think all of you have one of those. To give you just a quick overview on what the project is, it was a call for projects from Metro, and the cities of Glendale, Burbank, and Pasadena all applied to go in together on this project. And so we were awarded the funding, and now my role is the project manager, so I'm working closely with the city of Glendale to do a lot of the administration of the program. But basically what we're doing is creating a new website where people from those 3 cities can go on and have a multimodal resource for planning their trips. So they can look and see about biking, carpooling, taking transit. We're incorporating all of the different providers like Metro, MetroLink, and the municipal providers on the transit page. And then there are also opportunities for those cities and also local employers and other groups to get involved and provide information to the participants in this program as well. So we're looking to launch in October. So you'll be seeing communications out about that. And we're really trying to involve the cities as much as we can to give them an opportunity to, for example, if we want to talk about pedestrian safety or if there are going to be road closures or any other information we want to provide to the public, we're happy to use this as a forum for that for the city. One other note, we will also be offering discounts on transit and hopefully van pooling. We're working out the details on the van pooling, but that'll be another opportunity for people to try a new mode of getting around. So I think we have a couple minutes if you guys have any questions for me.
Yes, I would be interested, please, in the budget for this. What is the amount of money and for how long? And
we were awarded a little over $400,000 from Metro, so that's the amount of the grant that we got. And then we also have some cash and in-kind match coming from each of the 3 cities. And the project is funded through June of 2015, but we're really actively looking for ways to make sure that this is a self-sustaining system. So once it's up, we can continue having it as a resource for the public and for cities and other groups to get information out.
thank you.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, my contact information is
Very
here,
good.
so if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Erica. Good luck on that. Thank you.
I have a card. Is it John Kosian? But you wanted to speak on pedestrian safety? Yes. Right. So I'm going to hold your card until we get to that. Okay, that's very good. I'm done with the oral communications. No other cards. May I have the next item?
At 5 is information only. 5A is Durand Street Crossing grade separation by Mr. Don Sepulveda, Executive Officer with Metro.
Good evening, Madam Chair and other directors. I am Don Sepulveda, Executive Officer of Regional Rail for LA Metro. We deal with the Metrolink involvement, the regional rail involvement, everything that rolls with steel wheels in LA County aside from the transit that Metro operates. I wanted to talk with you about the Doran Street grade crossing and our Doran Street Broadway Brazil access project. I want to give you a little overview, and if with your permission, I'm going to continue on for several slides, and then I'm going to turn the discussion over to the consultant project manager, and then I will take it back from him at one point. So what we're talking about is this area that you see cordoned by San Fernando Road and the railroad right-of-way in the east, the 134 freeway in the north, Colorado in the south, and the LA River in the west. This area is essentially a landlocked area served by two at-grade crossings, one at Doran Street and one at Broadway Brazil. We have been working with the cities on this grade separation program to improve the safety at the Doran Street crossing and at the crossings in general, maintain the access to the area in the Atwater district, which is the area that's landlocked by those four items, and developed a solution that actually meets the needs of not just the area inside that rectangle, but also in Glendale as well. This is the challenge that we have. At-grade crossings in incidents in Los Angeles County have been on the rise in the last 5 years. As a matter of fact, this has been a national trend. It's become really alarming as we start going from 20 to 32 in 1 year. What this has prompted is prompted a number of things. It's prompted us to start looking at more seriously at grade crossings, especially at Doran Street and at Broadway Brazil, and address particular problems that have been actually happening there. So, next please. So, this is the background of it. I discussed a moment ago the context of the crossings. Doran Street has a rather interesting history. As you know, the Doran Street crossing is located right next to a propane facility, in which case if there's an accident there, it may result in some explosion or some sort, so it's a particularly hazardous crossing. It's on a blind curve, and there's several other issues that relate it to it as particularly a crossing that needs some attention. The Metro Board in 2011 actually approved $6.6 million to improve the safety at the Doran Street crossing. We have been using that money to advance a grade separation of the crossing. The safest way or the best way to improve safety at a crossing is to close it and/or grade separate it, and that's been our goal. So, a bridge over or under? Yes. Currently, when you cross over the railroad tracks, when they're at the same level as of the street, that's what we refer to as an at-grade crossing or a level crossing. A grade-separated crossing would be either bridge over the roadway, or we would build an underpass, in which case we'd build bridges for the railroad over the roadway. Those are the options that we have.
I have a question. Could you please clarify, you used a dollar number, 5-point-something million.
$6.6 million.
$6.6 million,
yes, sir.
Thank you. And you said to advance. Is this the total cost of the project? Is this design time, cost? Could you please define the dollar numbers, what they're specifically are for?
Yes, sir. The $6.6 million is actually going to be used for design and environmental clearance and working on interim conditions for Doran Street, which I'm going to get to right now. The Doran Street history has been that there have been attempts by the California Public Utilities Commission, who actually regulate grade crossings in the state of California and regulate the railroads, to try and close this crossing for a number of years. This has been a subject of hearings between the City of Glendale, City of Los Angeles, Atwater Community, the Pelincone community, and various other communities to try and work out solutions to the Doran Street crossing that have been plaguing this area. There's a significant issue of train horn noise because of the close proximity of Broadway Brazil, Doran Street, Flower Street, Grandview, and Sonora. We've got a very long stretch there where the trains are leaning essentially on their horn in the middle of the night. One of the things that the city of Glendale has been looking to is a quiet zone in the area. That gives you a little bit more on the background of the history. The current improvements at the area have been, if you recall, the Broadway Brazil crossing has been closed for some time now. It's related to some improvements that were a joint effort between the city of Glendale and the city of Los Angeles. The city of Glendale has finished their side of the improvements quite a while ago. The city of Los Angeles is just wrapping up theirs. They're doing some mop-up, some punch list items to try and correct a couple of things that have popped up, but they're moving through with that. Once they get those cleared up, that crossing will open up again, and there'll be access to the area. As a result of some of the hearings that have been going on with this, it was decided to have Doran Street in an interim condition until it can be grade separated as a one-way westbound configuration. And that one-way westbound configuration will go into design in the near future, and that will be enacted at such time as we can close it with a grade separation. And I'd like to turn over to Pat Somerville of HNTB, who is the project manager from the engineering consulting side of it.
Good evening, Commissioners. Pat Somerville, Consultant Project Manager for HNTB, working with Metro, working through the alternatives for the project. As we approach the alternatives analysis, first and foremost, our goal is safety. Our goal is to provide a grade separation that does provide the ultimate safety improvement. Even though we have interim improvements that have occurred at Broadway and Brazil, will occur at Doran, there's still the inherent conflict of pedestrian, cyclist, vehicles, and the train. Grade separation removes that conflict in its entirety. We also need to provide 2 points of access into the Atwater area north of Colorado. This was required by the first responders. So we cannot just close one of the crossings or both of the crossings without making sure there's 2 points of ingress and egress for the first responders. This also helps facilitate access in and out for the community as well and the businesses. We're also focusing on the traffic objectives. When we look at our alternatives, traffic patterns are going to have to change just a little bit. And what we're making sure we're doing is that when the traffic is being shifted, it's staying where we want it to be on the arterials and as close to and from the freeways, both the 134 and the I-5. Avoid directing any traffic into the residential neighborhoods. This includes Concord and up into the Pelincone areas. We're also making sure that any of our alternatives is facilitating active transportation elements from pedestrians and cyclists. So as we design an overpass, look at an alternative for an overpass, the overpass will facilitate both pedestrians with sidewalks and cyclists with on-street Class 2 bikeways. And lastly was the consistency with the LA River Revitalization Plan. As we all are probably aware, the Corps has adopted Alternative 20 for the LA River Revitalization as their preferred alternative. This has a big impact in the area of the Verdugo Wash and the LA River. So we wanted to look at our alternatives to see and make sure that we're consistent with their plan, that we would not be building anything that would preclude them for what they envision for this area. Next slide. So the first alternative, and we've looked through probably a dozen different alternatives. Some have fallen out, some are moving forward right now in further analysis. The first alternative we're looking at is the Doran Overpass. And what this does is take, we have a pointer by chance? Right there, right here. It works? Oh, great. What this does, here's Doran Street, San Fernando Road. What this will do is this creates an overpass of Doran Street up over the top of San Fernando Road. It'll go over top of the railroad tracks as well as West San Fernando Road, and then loop back in and tie into West San Fernando Road. This will take all of the traffic that is heading over on that side onto Doran To handle the traffic that's currently on Dorn and San Fernando Road going to and from the freeway, we would realign Commercial Street to take that traffic and align that with the 134 ramps. There's a blue line through here. This is the approximate footprint of the LA River Revitalization Plan, Alternative 20. What we would do in this case is we'd extend our bridge a little bit further to accommodate and be able to bridge over any future improvement of the LA River Revitalization as part of this project. This alternative would allow us to close the Dorn Street grade separate, or the Dorn Street at-grade crossing. This would not affect the Broadway Brazil at-grade crossing. It would remain open as it is as an at-grade crossing. It would not be grade separated in this alternative. The next alternative we're looking at actually has two components to it. The first is what we're referring to as a Fairmont connector. And what that is an extension of West San Fernando Road under the 134 freeway, under Fairmont, and it'll actually loop around and connect up to the Fairmont Avenue Bridge. This provides us an outlet, egress point off the north end of the Atwater area. In addition to that, we're looking at an overpass, and we're looking at several different alternatives of where this overpass wants to be located. But somewhere between Dorn and down near Broadway Brazil, preferably a little bit further to the south, probably in the Salem-Sperry vicinity. We're looking at several different alignments to be able to connect San Fernando Road up over the top and connect into West San Fernando Road.
Can I ask you,
Absolutely.
the dotted line?
Yes.
Okay, so explain that to me.
This dotted line, that's
Right.
the footprint, the approximate footprint of Alternative 20 that the Corps of Engineers is looking at as part of the LA River Revitalization Plan. This would be the area that they would be considering turning into the wetlands marshland.
So that area, I think there's a recycling plant there right now,
There's a recycling plant up in this vicinity, yes.
and then all of that would become a marsh, for lack of a better word,
Yes.
marshy area.
As part of their plan, yes.
How does that affect the first alternative?
Can you go back one slide? We're actually inside that footprint, just in this vicinity here, where Dorn is looping around to connect into West San Fernando Road. And what we'd propose to do is put that onto a bridge structure.
And I'm sorry, that loop, that candy cane,
Yes.
is a
That's
proposal?
correct. That's the,
Because right now it's a cul-de-sac.
yes, the
Right.
end of Dorn Street is a
I
cul-de-sac
see.
down here. Yes.
Okay.
There's a brewery there.
Excuse me?
Is there a brewery there?
Yes, Golden Road Brewery, right here, these three buildings.
Thank you.
And there's no engineering issue by doing that if it appears to be within a marshland?
Correct. We could design the bridge much like the Fairmont Bridge as it crosses the Verdugo Wash, and there's columns inside the Verdugo Wash supporting that bridge. We'd have something similar in this instance, and we would design it both for today's condition as well as the future condition, depending on what the timeline is for the LA River Revitalization Plan. So we could accommodate both scenarios.
And this would be just to accommodate the traffic in that area, just to help people in that area go that. Do you have an understanding of how much that alternative is?
We are still working up estimates for both construction and right-of-way impacts, as every alternative will have some form of right-of-way impact.
Also, could you please, I know that you're back now to alternative one, but I seem to see primarily an emphasis on cars, which is, I know, one of the issues, but could you please describe what pedestrians are going to be doing
Certainly.
in the first alternative, and then go through the alternatives in addition to the vehicles?
Absolutely. In this alternative, this first alternative with the Dorn overpass, this would close the at-grade crossing. For pedestrians, The bridge, as it comes across up over the top, would have sidewalks on it to accommodate pedestrians. It would also have sufficient width on the pavement surface for a striped bike lane. Pedestrians along San Fernando Road that want to cross the tracks, in this instance, would be using commercial and then come across.
Walk on there.
Yes, yes. They'd have direct access, also grade separated, similar to the vehicles.
And that will meet, excuse me, I'm sorry, that will meet ADA?
Correct, it would. We've, the roadway profiles, and keep in mind, our roadway has to go up 30 feet to get up over top of those railroad tracks and come back down. That's why there's so much length on each side. But those grades we have below the requirements for ADA.
Now, with this Dorn overpass, will you be able to accommodate cyclists?
Yes, we'd have a stripe.
You don't have an issue with a width?
No. We'd be providing sufficient curb-to-curb width for the traffic lanes as well as a striped Class 2 bike lane.
And I take it that's two ways,
Correct.
for pedestrians and for bicycles and for
Cyclists
cars?
and vehicles.
The configuration of the roadway, is that one car travel lane in each direction?
Correct. It's one travel in each direction. The existing traffic numbers using these at-grade crossings doesn't require the demand for 2 lanes in each direction. So every alternative we'll be looking at will be 1 lane in each direction.
And just for clarification, so if a pedestrian wanted to exit Golden Road and cross San Fernando, they would have to get onto this bridge, go all the way around, and get to that side street just east of San Fernando, and then come back around to catch, say, the bus to go southbound?
Correct. And what we would expect is currently the bus stops are located right at Dorn Street. We would expect with the project in place that the bus stops would be moved down near the revised, improved intersection of Commercial. So it'd put it in closer proximity at that point, but you're correct that the pedestrians would have to use that connector up and over and come back down.
In some of the LA River revitalization plan, where there's talk about soft bottom, which I think is what you're implying here possibly, there's also a pretty good understanding that that's not going to happen in certain areas and that there would be major potential new density and development. If that were to happen, how would you then have the requirements for pedestrian and cars, should that be developed into more density as opposed into a soft bottom?
At this point in time, we're unaware of any other development plans within, say, the Atwater area with the river revitalization. We know what the City of LA's plan originally was. There is not that level of detail yet for future economic development as part of the core plan.
I suggest you consider maybe taking a look at that, because the current river there, please help me, that is concrete, right?
Yes,
So
a portion of it is.
a good, okay. So I understand that where it's concrete, the amount of land that's needed, east and west of that to make that soft bottom is apparently prohibitive, except in certain areas like the grant we got from the federal government. If that were to become, other than that, I think it would be appropriate to consider what that zone might end up being because of potential density there, over and above soft bottom.
Correct. And we have been in discussions with the City of LA, the City of LA's River Revitalization Group, but there has not been any documents or any rezoning or indication of rezoning as of yet for the areas within the Atwater area adjacent to what would become the river revitalization within that area.
Thank you.
What about if a truck or a vehicle is on 134 westbound, need to access Atwater? Basically, they have to exit, go down Concord, turn around, go over the bridge.
For a truck, in this scenario, a truck that's westbound on
Yes.
the 134 would exit onto Fairmont. They would now, today, what they would do is they would do exactly what you said. They'd make a right turn, they would go to Concord, down to Dorn and across.
Or left turn and left turn?
Yes, I'm sorry, left. So that's what, in this scenario, that the traffic movements to and from the freeway really remain unchanged in this scenario.
Well, they have a choice of going left or right when they exit. If they make a left, they can go to San Fernando and make another left as well. So we'll be potentially dumping a lot of traffic into residential area by doing so.
If the trucks today are using the westbound, exiting, coming to Concord, coming back on Doran, to come across into the Atwater area, they'd be doing the same thing in this alternative after it was built, because they're going to come straight over the top and connect in without having to wait for a train or anything of the sort. So they'll have direct access in.
Now, if a truck that's going eastbound, all they have to do is exit and make a right and right around the
Correct.
two rights there on the ramp.
The movements in this alternative are say, near identical to what they currently are, because we're providing the access in virtually the identical point where they had access today. The change is the access to San Fernando Road, where today you have an intersection of Doran Street and San Fernando Road. That is also now grade separated because we had to bridge over the top. So all the movements that are happening at this intersection are now pushed a little further to the south to a realignment of Commercial Street.
How many columns will this sort of loop require in the water?
We're not to the point of actually laying that part out, but probably 4 or 5 coming around in 2 sets, 2 columns at each
On
point.
each side, yeah. Okay.
I know the lifespan of many of these bridges are 100 years potentially. So keeping that in mind and keeping in mind the revitalization plan for the river, is there consideration, if this alternative were to move forward, to have bulb outs facing the river for pedestrian relief / recreational spaces? I know that they're considering, they have that now for the Riverside Bridge that they're doing near Chinatown, and also on the Hyperion Bridge connecting Atwater to Silver Lake.
The potential would exist to include that, yes.
Okay. Will it include it?
To be discussed as the project moves forward.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I'm interested in the logic, since safety is a #1 criterion, and there's an alternative that leaves a crossing open. Other than dollars, why would one do that if there's a concern at crossings? Why wouldn't you address both? I know you do it in other alternatives,
Yes.
at least what I looked at very quickly. Why would even this be considered as an alternative if safety is a major issue at crossings?
Available funding probably is going to be one of the primary aspects. I mean, the goal, by all means, would be to close as many, and grade separate as many of the at-grade crossings as we can.
Okay, so if that's the goal, then why study one and you propose one that remains open? I mean, other than dollars, which I know dollars are critical, I don't understand if that criterion is #1, then why would you even put on the board something that says you leave it open?
One of the things that we are finding in our analysis of these alternatives was just exactly what you're talking about. If we go back and look at this alternative 1 and just only grade separate Doran Street, we do leave Broadway Brazil open, and we've only solved the issue, the question, or answered the question at 1 grade crossing. Can you go to the next slide, please? If we do this other alternative, we have the opportunity now to close 2 at-grade crossings. Go back 1, please. If you look at the impacts to the right-of-way related to this crossing, if we just do this 1 crossing, we would have this crossing, and then at a future date, sometime in the future, there would be a 2nd grade separation at the Broadway Brazil location. So one of the things that we are looking at is the value of this alternative as it relates to that alternative. So we have to analyze all these alternatives, and they shake out as we move forward in the design process. One of the things that we're really finding is that one thing I neglected to mention earlier, and I should have, and that is this same corridor will be used by the California High-Speed Rail Authority when the California High-Speed Rail comes through this area. When that happens, they have a completely grade-separated corridor. So Broadway Brazil would be grade separated at that time as well. So our argument is, well, why not go and look at the value of an alternative 2 as compared to an alternative 1 and see what it looks like on paper when we start looking at the impacts and we start looking at the benefits.
In other words, both crossings will eventually close.
Both crossings will eventually close.
If we look at the
yes.
big picture.
Yes.
Depending on the definition of future.
Well, right. Well, at some time in the future, whether it be now, whether it be 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever, Broadway Brazil and Doran Street both would have to be grade separated. What we're seeing is that if we can take advantage and have the impacts related to a grade separation once, now, and solve both issues, then that might be more beneficial than just the single grade separation. And that's part of our analysis.
Why can't you put underneath and let it go?
Why can't we put one underneath, sir?
The rail. Let's just go on.
Put the rail underneath?
Below grade level.
The geometry of the railroad will not allow us to get down and then get back up again before Colorado. The railroads can handle 1 or 2% grade. Cars can handle up to 5, 6, 7% grade. So what that means is that the railroads have a real shallow incline to get to underneath to get under. That's the same thing with an overcrossing. We can't go over the Doran Street in Broadway, Brazil, because we can't get up in time because of the 134 freeway, and we can't get down in time before Colorado Boulevard. So those are our challenges as to going up or over. That's why the railroad is not an option to move. And we also looked at an undercrossing of the roadway under the railroad, and by the time you get done with that, you've got a bridge for San Fernando Road, a bridge for the railroad, and then a bridge for East or West San Fernando Road in order to get that done. And every time you build a bridge, you have a roadway detour. So now we're buying right-of-way for roadway detours and really disrupting the traffic in the area. So these are ideas that we've looked at.
Has the idea been presented to you to extend over the LA River?
We're going to get to that.
Okay. I didn't see it as
We're going to get to that.
an alternative. Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay. Back to alternative 2. As I was mentioning, that we have an alternative to a connector to Fairmont, which is the extension of West San Fernando Road. And then an overpass, and this is just one of probably 6 different scenarios we're looking at right now, in the vicinity of Broadway, Brazil, up to probably the Salem, Sperry vicinity, of providing an overpass. Again, the overpass would accommodate both pedestrians, sidewalks on both sides, as well as cyclists with striped Class 2 bike lanes on the bridge. This alternative actually, again, in tandem, these 2 pieces form this one alternative. This alternative allows us to close both the Doran Street and the Broadway Brazil at-grade crossings. We've completely grade separated this corridor and closed the 2 at-grade crossings. The other element that we're looking at in here, and we're having discussions with the city as well as the consultant the city has, is for the Riverwalk path. We're looking at how to incorporate the pedestrian recreational trail crossing of the Verdugo Wash adjacent to the existing Fairmont, so that we can accommodate that in this alternative. Talking about the pedestrians, one of the reasons why this becomes a little more critical for us in this alternative is Fairmont Avenue itself does not have pedestrian facilities on it. Our connector coming off of West San Fernando Road and connecting up to Fairmont will not have sidewalks because there's nowhere for them to go once they come up to Fairmont. That's where this other recreational trail path can provide an additional outlet for cyclists and pedestrians from the Atwater area. The project is outside the footprint of the LA River Revitalization. The LA River Revitalization Group for the City of LA actually really likes this alternative for that sake. They're in favor of the connector on the inside to Fairmont Avenue. They also have gateways on Sperry as well as Brazil Street as part of the revitalization plan. So they believe this is the most compatible alternative with their plan.
Excuse me, I'm having trouble interpreting. If I'm walking west on Doran Street and I want to cross, I don't understand how I get over to that other portion. It's difficult for me to interpret that. Could you help, please?
Yes, therein lies one of the challenges with the alternative for pedestrians that are in the Doran vicinity. Because there is not a grade crossing. It would be closed at this point. There would also not be any pedestrian or cyclist crossing at that point.
So they would go down to
Pedestrians and cyclists from here would
to
actually
Broadway.
have to come all the way down to use the grade separation here.
Alternatively, they would go all the way north to where?
airport.
Up to...
Just kidding.
Is that Flower?
Yeah, because Fairmont Avenue is also grade separated from San Fernando Road. Part of our work is doing a traffic study, which includes truck and pedestrian counts at both of the crossings. And we've done those counts. Unfortunately, the Broadway Brazil crossing was closed. So we have a count at Doran. We have counts that were done in previous years. To date, the pedestrian volumes have been extremely low. That was one of our concerns, is the lack of direct access in the Doran vicinity coming across. It is something that will continue to be looked at and considered.
So then what about a vehicle coming west on Doran? Could you please trace for me how that...
For a vehicle coming west on Doran, they would then continue south, go south, and then loop across.
I appreciate that. Come down to the other one.
Yes. Yeah, this will in turn become the primary ingress point. The Fairmont connector will serve probably, for the most part, the north end of the Outwater area for ingress egress. It does provide that second point of ingress egress for the first responders.
So Doran would become a T intersection.
Yes, it would.
No vehicle. It'd be basically closed, but no vehicles and no pedestrians there.
In other words, if someone's on, let's call it in front of the propane facility, is going to go across, going up the bridge, and go to underpass and connect to Fairmont once it makes a loop.
Correct.
Once it gets to Fairmont, you're already up above grade, and over there you can either make a left or right turn. I presume there will be a traffic light over there.
Yes, there would be a traffic signal installed.
So if a car or truck is over there, went over, made the loop, got there on the bridge, they had to make a left or right. So from there, they can get on either 5 North through Flower, or if they want to get on 134, they still have to come, make a left, go turn around, get back on 134.
Correct.
That's huge looping.
Right. So for the westbound truck exiting could now make a left turn here and enter Atwater and not have to use Concord. They wouldn't have to loop around on Fairmont to Concord to Doran. They'd be able to make a left directly onto Fairmont and enter the Atwater area.
Okay. These still would be 1 lane each.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on this alternative?
But the one at down where, let's say, Salem and Sperry in that area, where's your on-ramp going to be? Where's the bottom? You're starting from...
In this alternative that's depicted here, this connection here is in the vicinity of Salem.
So it's still going to make a loop before it goes back up. So you're entering, that area is all residential. There's a lot of residential over there on the right.
Beyond this, yes, but there's no connection to Concord. This would be a signalized intersection at San Fernando Road, and it would just be a loop.
Make a U?
Takes you, yeah, basically a U shape up.
Go up,
and then come back
put you over
down.
the bridge, and then put you, okay.
Yeah, and then come back down in the vicinity of Brazil and West San Fernando Road.
You mentioned bike lanes on the northern part where Fairmont is. Would there also be bike lanes on the southern segment?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Has there been consideration for, and I don't know when Fairmont was constructed, why this was not considered, to have bike lanes on Fairmont to connect to the bike lanes that you're proposing?
I wouldn't be able to respond to that. I do know that there would be challenges in accommodating bikes, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons why there's not pedestrian facilities, because of the connections closer to the 134 ramps in the way that the road splits. One part goes down to San Fernando Road, the other goes up and over. You have you could trap pedestrians and cyclists in an area where they don't want to be. So I'm guessing, and gang, that predates you as well, but I'm guessing that's the reason why.
I mean, it's something to consider. Unfortunately, I have to also use that bridge as a bicyclist, so it's something to consider, especially for Glendale residents that would want to traverse over to Atwater to visit, say, Golden Road. This option seems very, very restrictive for pedestrians even more. So.
Next slide. The third alternative, and the last that we're presenting today, this is the extension of Doran Street over the LA River and making a connection to Zoo Drive on the west side of the LA River. So here's the existing Doran Street. We'd basically start elevating the roadway to cross over the LA River, connect to Zoo Drive, in the vicinity of the Zoo Drive on and off ramps from the I-5 freeway. This alternative has several technical challenges related to it, one crossing the LA River with another vehicular bridge, interaction with the LA River bicycle lane that's over on the west side, and the connection to Zoo Drive in the close proximity to the on and off ramps. Technically challenged, feasible, but technically challenging. We would also couple this alternative with the connector to Fairmont, exactly like we discussed with alternative 2. So this alternative also has those two components to it. This, similar to alternative 1, does not affect the existing Broadway Brazil at-grade crossing. That would remain open. So there would be modifications that would need to be made over onto the within the Caltrans right-of-way. Zoo Drive is a 2-lane road that also serves soccer fields, dog park, and feeds into Griffith Park and the LA Zoo. So there's very sensitive land uses on that side. There are challenges in meeting our goal of trying to keep traffic, for the most part, where it's at today and wants to be, and that's on the arterials, close proximity to the ramps. While this does put you in close proximity to the I-5 off-ramp at Zoo Drive as well as the 134 East, the other routes become a little more circuitous to get to and from, with the potential for traffic to be diverted onto Zoo Drive through the Griffith Park area using the Victory exit off of the 134, which is not desirable.
Well,
this alternative also places that roadway right smack in the middle of the LA River revitalization piece that they're looking at. So there's challenges there as well.
I'm very interested in this alternative. One, I was there at the opening of the Fairmont Bridge, and I wish there was much more traffic going through that nice piece of construction. But I do feel that I don't think, necessarily, my opinion, that the city necessarily needs to have that. I think your first alternative, which was the candy cane loop around Doran Bridge. I'd like to see connectivity. If I had to say a theme of our city through the past few years, it's connectivity. And I would love to be able to see, like, I know there's challenges. I can only imagine. However, this LA, Los Angeles revitalization project in and of itself is an incredibly, some may call it monstrous project. With that being said, I don't see the value of making the connections so people can get to the equestrian center, can go from Disney to downtown, being able to use the paths in the best possible way. I see this as being the most promising. And, you know, that marshy area, I'm sure that may become an issue. I don't know if it's because of the columns that you might need to extend the bridge. You know, I think that should be something looked into, because it's already there. There's not going to be big obstructions. From what I understand, Rubik, if I'm not mistaken, are there not columns already in the wash? So it really, and how the wash is no, not the wash. We're talking about the river. How wide is that?
At this point, the river is about 600 feet wide.
It's from the point where you would extend the Doran.
From the wall on the west side to the wall on the east side of the LA River is about 600 feet.
600 feet.
And it's wider at this point because this is where the Verdugo Wash enters into the LA River. This is about the widest point of the LA River in this vicinity, is where the crossing shown. We would, as you did mention, the bridge that's crossing the LA River, we would actually extend closer to West San Fernando Road with columns. That would allow us to accommodate what the LA River revitalization might be wanting to do in this vicinity.
Yeah.
Very similar to the alternative one as we discussed.
That's such a big area that they're going to flood. That's my feeling, that it's very big. And I don't think that should inhibit the city from pushing for, you know, whatever it decides to do. But again, the idea of connectivity, the idea of making existing bridges link with other areas, to me, is by far the best. Even though there's challenges, and I don't want to sweep that away, I think that's just truly an amazing. We're fortuitous to be able to have an option like this, to be able to make, you know, to think it through. I mean, the revitalization project is how much? Is it $1 billion?
I think $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ton of money. So, you know, that's kind of like, and I'm sure it's not all funded at this point. Am I?
Don't know.
I would probably guess it wouldn't be. You know, it's not a you know, a crazy idea to pursue something like that, but that's my thought on it.
In this scenario, why are you keeping Doran open and not doing anything over there?
Dorn in this instance would be closed.
I'm sorry, Brazil, down where the arrow is. Yeah. Broadway, Brazil, why are you keeping it open?
Because we need another point of ingress-egress between Colorado and the north side. We don't believe that all of the volumes of traffic out of this area could be accommodated by a connection off the north end.
Commissioner Krukjian, also is a requirement by our emergency personnel to have 2 points of access.
No, but in the earlier version, you were putting a bridge there, an overpass.
In this vicinity?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
And to mitigate the same problem, but now why aren't you proposing a bridge just on this time around?
It would, if we wanted to close both crossings, as well as provide a crossing at Zoo Drive from the extension of Doran as well as this, it will be an issue of cost and right-of-way impacts. Could you? Absolutely.
Because the way I see it is, this is a metro problem, has to do with rail, and I guess it's inevitable that at one point or another, based on what Mr. Sepulveda said, it's closed. Might as well deal with it the right way from its inception. Why can't we, from Zoo Drive, when we're putting the bridge, make something like a Y, one kind of loops around and ends up on like where, and ends on, or maybe right in front of the brewery or the gas place, and another one make a left, go up and connect it to the Fairmont Bridge, where the intersection of the bike lanes is, bike path is, so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So it's sort of wise, and one goes this way, and one sort of loops around and ends up on San Fernando Road West. And I think by doing so, Glendale will be a lot more, will have a lot less traffic in dealing with LA traffic, which is Atwater's LA, it's not Glendale.
Correct.
And let LA sort of bear their own burden. And why should we deal with their traffic?
I have a question about this alternative. Does the bridge that you're proposing over the LA River include a bike path?
In this scenario, we're actually providing a barrier-separated Class 1 recreational trail.
So it would be much like the configuration that we see on the river today,
Yes.
which has a mixed pedestrian bicycle.
Yes.
I do have a concern about this one just because of the LA River plan. Our own city council pushed for Alternative 20 that includes improvements to the confluence of the Wash and the river. And I think this alternative jeopardizes that the most. And although it does connect across the river and does have a bike path, it's severely restricting access for Glendale residents to come across to the river or to businesses on Atwater for our own residents. So I have strong reservations about this alternative for those reasons, because of access to the river and access to Atwater for our own residents. But I'll have to just wait for the EIR. So is that, I imagine you'll talk about the timeline soon?
I generally concur with those comments and have another question, please. I take it you've met with Omar Bronson,
The River Corps?
LA River Corporation, the LA River Revitalization Corporation?
We've been meeting with Carol Armstrong from the city of LA in their river revitalization group.
Yeah, I highly recommend you also consider speaking with the LA River Revitalization Corporation and the executive director there, because I'm going to go back now since it's so seminal in the presentation about this potentially becoming soft bottom. And when I see the blue line, and then the blue line, I can see it potentially when it goes east like it does, but then when it takes a sharp, dramatic parallel line to the west, you can't do soft bottom like that. It's got, we all know it, feather it out. And to feather it out, it costs a lot of money, unfortunately. So the reason I'm suggesting you speak with him is because there's also people in that organization that's looking at, as I mentioned earlier, other developments other than that, where it's possible. And the comments that were made earlier about getting people who live to the east and want to get to the river, if it's not soft bottom and it's other activities, the big movement is to have activities on the river.
Correct.
So it might be appropriate to consider alternatives that have other than soft bottom, is what I'm trying to communicate. Unless you really feel it's only going to be that, and I know the indications are that, but those people who are advocating it are also seeing that it might be possible that we really should have more activities on the river and live with the concrete that's there and can't get soft bottom. So when we do that, we set up a whole different environment on the river. So I highly recommend you take a look at and speak with Omar.
The possibility of the bridge extension to Zoo Drive, the off-ramp for Zoo Drive, can that be aligned in such a way so that it's, perhaps a better connection between the two?
In terms of aligning this bridge with the ramp itself? Is that what you're
Right.
Caltrans does not like that. Caltrans doesn't like how close the connection is already. It's a non-standard feature. Caltrans likes the ramps to enter in to the side street or the arterial street in the T intersection and prefer to have nothing opposite of it. And then any other intersections, they want either 300 or 500 feet away from that, depending on the type of facility. So that's one of those hurdles to get over. And we have talked with Caltrans. They're acknowledging what needs to be done.
Yeah. They're a great group of people. They can,
Acknowledge.
sure, they can compromise. All right, very good.
This is where you come back.
So I'm back on. You mentioned about a timeline. Here we go. Start talking about the timeline. Currently, we're in the alternatives analysis stage. We're looking at the alternatives. We're developing a matrix for selection of the alternatives, and we'll be doing a project study report on the alternative, coming to some conclusions. From then, we'll go into environmental studies and preliminary engineering. We're set to move that forward as soon as we possibly can. We're looking at several other options that are less right-of-way intensive, so that so we can move forward with that. We expect to be in PE and environmental through the summer of 2015. From there, we'll move into final design in the summer of 2015, carrying through to the winter of 2016. And then we'll start going into construction in the fall of 2016. And roughly construction, about 2 years of construction after that.
Our city council is waiting for EIR to, at this point, they're on hold.
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, yes, we are anxiously waiting the release of the EIR. The question I had for Mr. Sepulveda is, are they going to be additional community meetings or workshops?
Yes, we're scheduling those, and we're planning on going out for some community workshops in the near future. What we are trying to do is nail down some of our options a little bit more before we do go out to the community. We also need to go out to the community and talk about the interim improvements at Doran Street a little bit more and show them what is planned for that. So yes, we do plan on going back out to the public before too long.
If you were to strike a vertical line, Don,
Can you go
right
back
there.
one slide, please?
Where, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm talking about this.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
schedule.
I was foreseeing you talking about the map. I apologize.
No, I apologize too. I'm sorry. If you were to strike a vertical line somewhere on that schedule, where does the $6.6 million stop? And then,
The $6.6 million stops right at the end of final design.
okay, so this is nothing for hard cost, except maybe some of the interim work?
We may be doing some right-of-way acquisition in that time frame. When we talk about, in the next slide, we'll talk about funding a little bit more.
Oh.
And so let me, as a matter of fact, let's go to that slide and we can talk about that. I'm sorry. Yep, there we go. Our project funding allows us to actually do some advanced work on that. We're funding the $6.6 million, the design and the interim improvements at Doran Street out of Measure R, the Measure R half-cent tax measure. We have what we call Measure R 3%, which allows 3% of the Measure R monies to go to commuter rail and railroad-related infrastructure. So the money comes out of the federal ARA funds, and that has a sunset of the end of 2017. So what we intend to do is once we get our decision to move forward on this, we intend to do some right-of-way acquisition to start moving. Once we get some designs laid out that we're actually able to do that, then we can start spending those funds. That's $15.8 million. And then, of course, we have funding under the California High-Speed Rail Authority. This project is on a memorandum of understanding between several Southern California agencies, Metro included, and the California High-Speed Rail Authority. That MOU brings $1 billion of advanced investment into Southern California to work on bookend projects, connectivity projects. At Metro, we have several projects on that list that will be funded out of that. And what we have done is we've applied that funding to projects that have what we call independent utility, that they provide benefit to the communities, benefit to the existing railroad, as well as provide future benefit to the California High-Speed Rail Authority. An example is this grade separation. What we're intending to do is grade separate the entire right-of-way, which frees the right-of-way, which allows us to have a grade separation in the near term for the existing commuter rail lines and provide access for the community, while in the future allows for the passage of high-speed rail through down the same corridor. So it's not throwaway dollars, which is something that we want to make sure that we are stewards of. Next slide, please. So I give you my contact information. in order to, if you have any questions, of course. They have my personal cell phone number or desk number if you need to get a hold of me. And those are the, we have our Facebook page, of course, so we have to be social media receptive as we move forward into the new age. And regionalrail@metro.net is our email address if you have any additional questions.
I have a question for Mr. Galanian, because you had brought up the community meetings. Will you be announcing that at some point so the residents who really should have a say in this, all those people, all those folks along that corridor, how will that be done?
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, members of the Commission, Mr. Sepulveda and his consultants team have already conducted 2 or 3 workshops, and folks who attended those workshops have submitted their email addresses and physical addresses. So notices will go to them directly, I assume. But in addition to that, we'll have it advertised on our city's website. Ms. Haji Manukian will tweet it, and we will do our routine, normal process of publication that we do for our own city community meetings and City Connection. We'll publish it outside the City Hall, and we'll take advantage of every venue that we have, as well as we have a listing of our HOA, homeowners associations, and business associations within the area that we will directly inform.
Right, okay.
If I can add to that, on our last notifications on the public meetings, which were pretty well attended, I might add, we actually sent mailers to every address within a certain vicinity of the area. And that was pretty successful. We got a lot of response from that.
Excellent.
And we'll continue to do that as the other methods that he had spoken about.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
One more quick question, please. Your comment about the dollars through the California High-Speed Rail Authority, just so I understand, is that subject to the rail authority going on that line or going in that location, that kind of money, or is it a sphere of influence of it, or?
Well, currently the High-Speed Rail Authority is planning to go down that corridor in this area. That's the option.
That's the current plan.
That's their option. One of the things that we have been talking about with the High-Speed Rail Authority, and that is they have what they call their initial operating segment of the high-speed rail program, which will actually be temporary terminus, initial terminus, will be in the Burbank area.
I read that.
That is, the initial operating segment is where the project would be commercially viable for them. As part of that, they will rely on Amtrak and Metrolink to serve that interim station in Burbank through additional trains coming up this corridor. So if high-speed rail makes it into Burbank, we will need to supply additional trains to go along this corridor. So we see this as a mandatory project for in order to serve any long-term purpose on this corridor.
Thank you.
When do you anticipate the EIR to be released, and will it include the alternatives that were just mentioned?
The EIR, we will be actually looking at several alternatives. How many alternatives are actually in the EIR, we're not sure yet. Mm-hmm. That'll depend somewhat on the public meetings that we have when we put some of those out to the public meetings. It could be that an alternative, when we look at the matrix and we start looking at some of the options, it could be that an alternative has what we call fatal flaws, and we can't bring it forward. So exactly which alternatives are in the exact environmental document, I can't speak to just yet.
And when
we'll keep you informed.
And do you have an anticipated timeline of when that would be completed?
We actually are planning to start the environmental work, and I just went through it, and I got to remind myself here, in this summer. We're actually moving into it very soon. We're going to start getting into the environmental analysis, and this probably will shake into a little bit more of the fall. But once it starts moving forward in that, then what we'll do is we'll do federal or public notices that we are entering into the environmental process, and ask for public opinion and public comment on that environmental process. And of course, as part of that, we'll be doing more public meetings and get public comment. As with any sort of construction in a community, it's not successful unless it has the support of the community. And while and so this is very important to us, so we will be moving forward with that idea in mind.
Thank you.
At what point will the industry, you can explain it to me, obviously with the city of LA, this is a huge project for them, but coming up to next to the city of Glendale, that we are pulled into it. We have to.
We see this as a big project for both communities.
Right, exactly. My point, which I'm going to get to eventually, is when will, if there's an alternative, I know the EIR is going to come out, and that's going to give more clarity to our elected officials to go through to make decisions and think it through. But for just let's just say that there's an alternative. Let's say it's the alternative I particularly liked, which involved, making that extension of Doran all the way to Zoo Drive. And it involved a compromise between how that marsh kind of moves and kind of moves in downward. Is that discussed at that point, or do you go into, the EIR with already an established, this is the boundaries of how it's going to look?
Once we do some more engineering of it, that's when some of those questions will be answered. I'm not ready to answer the defined limits of any particular project because of the impacts that can happen on both sides. So what we have to do as part of the environmental process, however, is to look at all of the impacts, positive and negative, of the project as we move it forward. We can't selectively choose, or we can't limit the area of influence in order to ferret out an impact that we don't want to deal with. We have to include all those impacts as we move it forward.
I see. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Sepulveda, first of all, thank you for coming and doing for this, presenting us and the viewing public with all this material. A lot of this was new to me, except what I've been reading in a paper. Now that after the presentation, I see the urgency that the high-speed rail has, and it should be done. Might as well let's plan this in stages. If there's a shortage of money, whenever it's going to be done, the second phase of the both exits, could be dealt with it right now rather than in the future. I see your timelines over here, and if you have to go acquire property, I can't see Metro or anyone else buying this much land to plan these right now to put bridges and overpasses and everything else. Perhaps the alternative number 3, with some modifications, as Commissioner Yakubian stated, would probably be ideal and puts you in business much quicker, because you're not buying land, you're not moving businesses, you're not. The reason I'm saying that because I own property there. Some of my neighbors had to be moved and so forth. It's a nightmare to move businesses, especially businesses of the magnitude that you guys are looking over here. There's some serious business over there that needs to be moved. And if there's urgency over here, if there's a funding that might expire, I suggest you go the other way around.
We have several challenges with all of these alternatives. We do have right-of-way impacts with the extension over the river. We cut off access to several businesses along Doran Street because of that, and we'd have to acquire those properties because of that cut off access. Also, one of the other issues that we have with that option is an environmental process that could be lengthier because it is crossing the river. That is one of the challenges we have. So we've got to look at that as we move forward. That's one of the concerns that we have.
So the challenge is basically putting columns in the water. Is that what it is?
It's the Corps of Engineers has specific guidelines that they want when you start putting columns into their river. There's aesthetics issues that we'll have to work through with the bridge. There's wetlands issues we'd have to work through with the bridge. There are several river-related crossing issues that we would have to work through with that bridge that we don't have with some of the other alternatives.
That's more of a bureaucratic issues versus you may be in court for years in trying to move a business, like a studio or whatnot. I was told Lowe's was going to come into where Levitt's was many years ago. And the reason they did not go there is because the CEO of Lowe's flew over this area, and because of the very issue that we're discussing, ingress and egress, they chose not to. the man who probably passed on this location was a smart man. And can you imagine if Lowe's was there right now? You have to move Lowe's. I mean, I'd rather go over the bridge and keep those businesses over there intact. A lot of people over there that's there. Anyways, the river is moving a lot of business there anyways from what's being presented.
One of the, some of the options that we're looking at actually reduce the footprint of the structures. So as we move forward with that, we'll have to weigh that. But I understand your concern, and we have the same concern.
I mean, that's a boatload of money you're talking about.
It is. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. And this is why we're also concerned about the number of bridges that we put across the right-of-way. If we do a single bridge across the right-of-way, we reduce the impacts by half. And that's a big concern for us.
Mr. Kolanian, do we have engineers or consultants that's looking into what's going on that's hired by the city? Representing our residents?
Commissioner Kirkjian, not at this point in time. Metro has their own consultants and engineers who are working on different options. When the time comes and it necessitates the city to have an independent evaluation of the engineering aspects of it, I'm pretty sure we can manage that.
How often does the city get report from them about what's going on, what's kind of being discussed, what's in their camp, sort of, for us to know what's going on there, or for our residents, as a matter of fact, know what's going on there?
The means of dissemination of that information has been through community workshops, or as we meet with the City of LA staff to talk about the Riverwalk project, and as it relates to the Great Crossing, we have been kept up to speed as their progress with the different alternatives.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sepulveda. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Very informative, and all to you gentlemen as well. Thank you very much.
And if you ever have any questions, please address them and contact us, and we'll be able to provide those
I won't call
answers.
your cell phone. I won't bug you that much.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you.
Thank you.
I do have a card on this. Eric Hussein, who would like to speak on this subject, on this topic. Hi, Eric.
Hello, Eric Hussein. Thank you. I think the LA revitalization plan that's happening right in front of Glendale is a really exciting opportunity. It's $1 billion being invested right in our front doors, and it's going to make that place, which is just basically concrete and buildings that people don't really go to unless it's just for business, a place that people are going to enjoy and filled with a lot of recreational activities. And it's going to be a really nice opportunity for Glendale and a beautiful front door. I hope as this project goes forward, we can find how we can make a stronger connection outside of just a car connection, but some kind of a pedestrian and bicycle connection to what's happening and the revitalization effort. The way I see it is how do we make a family, a mother and her kids, feel safe to go from the Peliconi neighborhood or from the western downtown neighborhoods into the river area and the Riverwalk. The alternatives look like they might have some promise, but as far as what's presented, I don't feel like I would feel safe or a family would feel safe going over streets or through the Fremont flyover to get to the river. I think this is a really nice opportunity for Glendale to push for a stronger link. The money is there. Metro has the money. High Speed Rail has the money. The Metro R has the money. And maybe even if it's a simple bridge, a separate bridge that we can make happen that's just for pedestrian and bicycles, I think we should look into it. And we should ask Metro to look for it as this goes, before it goes too far. And I do want to mention that the Parks has been leading the effort for the Riverwalk, and the the Parks is in close collaboration with Public Works. And they do have 3 public meetings set up for next month. So I just want to make sure that the Commission is aware of that. And this is a Glendale hosted public outreach meetings for the 3 alternatives that Glendale is proposing for their own pedestrian and bicycle bridge connecting to the Riverwalk. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I comment, please, just briefly on that? Can I?
Okay. Well,
Just briefly, and I forgot earlier, and I apologize, but the comments that had just been made on the Metro presentation under objectives, item number 3 is something that I didn't see in any of the presentations, and maybe the speaker was referring to that. But it seems, I mean, do you have a landscape architect on the team? Are you working with people who are working with context sensitivity and quality of life? Because I don't see those on the exhibits.
Yes, we are. And if you would look at some of our exhibits, if we can back up a little bit, let's look at alternative 2, please. Actually, go forward. There we go. What we've looked at is the idea of pocket parks and other bicycle access points in order to bring it in with the community. If I wish there was some way we can blow up the picture for you, but we actually had a pocket park in that little horseshoe in the Glendale area that actually provided walk spaces and an outside kind of environment so that you could use it as a respite for your day. And if you look on the LA side, we forecasted the same thing. The other idea is if you look at the river plan, there's actually pathways that lead to the river along the thoroughfares, and what we've done is we've designed our project to actually connect with those pathways to make that a more convenient access. And another thing we've looked at is providing a bridge between the existing Riverwalk and an extension of that Riverwalk, which is south of the 134. So that would connect north of the 134 across the wash with south of the 134. So these are concepts that we have been looking at in order to make this a community project versus just another bridge.
So who's the landscape architectural firm involved?
Lynn Capuya and Associates.
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much. Can I have the next item?
Number 6 is a report only. 6A, report regarding recommendations to improve pedestrian safety in the city of Glendale.
Mr. Golanyan?
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, members of the Commission, this is a much anticipated report that we have been working on for the last 6 months. Recommendations for pedestrian safety improvements. Please forgive me if I have to refer to several documents in front of me in the course of the presentation. Do you have it up? Background? Great. So I don't intend to repeat the statistics that show we continue to have unacceptable number of auto and pedestrian collisions in the city. Back in June, we presented a report that accounted for bicycle and pedestrian numbers in the city. Switters shows the accident report as well as our own police department stats. But so at the direction of the City Council and after deliberation by yourselves, your commission on October 28th, 2013, last year, we formed a pedestrian safety task force we refer to as PSTF, and that was a subcommittee to your commission. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a very big thank you for all the members of the commission. The task force, we started with 19 people, 19 very committed, passionate, and steadfast individuals who gave their time and effort to come up with this report. We've had 5 meetings so far, and I just want to mention at least some of the groups who have attended our meeting. 2 of the commissioners of the TPC, we had representations from GUSD, we had 1 planning commissioner, representatives from Walk by Glendale, Glendale Community College, Transportation Management Association, now Go Glendale, And Erica Kemp is here. She has worked with us on the report, as well as Eric Yasayan, representation from Chamber of Commerce, Homeowners Coordinating Council, a couple of residents, ANCA, and Association of Adult Day Health Care Providers. That said, we also arranged for a couple of workshops through UC Berkeley Safe Transportation Research and Education Center. These were conducted on April 17th of this year. The community workshop, the 35 people attended, that again included residents, concerned citizens, representatives from schools, community groups, as well as the media. We also performed 2 separate walkability assessments. We formed 2 groups who covered major arterials and side streets, and the goal was to observe infrastructure conditions and behavior of all the road users. And after these assessments, we reconvened and discussed and reflected on what we have seen and experienced firsthand. UC Berkeley and California Walks then took all the information back. They worked on a report, submitted a report, and their recommendation was, although previously in 2009 there had been 6 E's that they had worked on, essentially evaluation, encouragement, and empowerment, the main area of focus this time around was going to be on engineering, enforcement, and education. With that, I'm going to move to the engineering recommendations that the task force has worked on. First one being to amend the high visibility crosswalk policy. This recommendation is for the city to revise the internal policy to include pedestrian collision hotspots that had been identified through the police reports and the pedestrian and bicycle counts, and other destinations, for example, senior centers, senior housing facilities, parks, and as such. The next recommendation is to establish or clarify a priority process for restriping crosswalks. Currently, we have several faded crosswalks throughout the city, and given our limited funds, we intend to target, at least initially, the most high-need areas for restriping of crosswalks. Once we take the report to council, we'll also be requesting funding so that we'll be able to enhance this program citywide. Next recommendation is to stripe additional advanced yield lines and restripe faded advanced yield lines citywide, as well as include them in all of our new roadway paving projects. And these are essentially lines that are placed 20 to 50 feet ahead of a marked crosswalk, and particularly at unsignalized mid-block crossings. Next recommendation is for some spot improvements. As part of our walkability assessment, we identified 2 intersections that needed improvement, namely Orange Grove and Glendale Avenue. This is a skewed angle intersection with poor visibility that we intend to square off and fix. And the other one was Kenwood and Broadway, that the recommendation was to install a fully signalized intersection. These are only 2 intersections of a number of hotspots that we have identified that we'll tackle one at a time. Next engineering recommendation is to develop a public priority process for implementing bulb outs, leading pedestrian intervals, and pedestrian scrambles. Essentially, we need to do some evaluation of appropriate locations that these will fit in. We have talked about perhaps some temporary delineation before committing funding and an effort to concrete improvements. The city of LA has implemented these delineated temporary improvements with great success, I hear, and we intend to do that. Also, the leading pedestrian interval was a recommendation that came through the workshop, which we are going to study to see if it's feasible and pick locations, intersections, or crosswalks to implement. Basically, it will give pedestrians a 5-second head start for the walk sign to come on before the green bulb starts for vehicles. Currently, they come on at the same time a pedestrian walks off the curb, and at the same time the vehicles have green lights, and we are trying to eliminate or reduce them as much as possible. And also the pedestrian scrambles are those that allow diagonal crossing across intersections. We have one in place in the city at Harvard and Brand, and it appears to be working well. We will conduct studies and analysis of high volume, high-speed intersections to implement these as much as we possibly can. On the enforcement recommendations, the first one is citywide implementation of speed feedback signs. These are stationary digital speed feedback signs that we own 4 of, and the recommendation is to place more of them on particularly along high-volume arterial roads. You might have noticed one that was temporarily installed on Kenyatta Boulevard that has become a permanent feature. And our experience has shown that psychologically it has a positive impact on reducing speeds. We are planning on purchasing additional digital signs for implementation of this recommendation. Next one is to improve public request process for deploying mobile police department warning signs. These are on trailers, and the recommendation is as a result of some residents not being clear about how the process works. We want to make it more transparent and streamlined and make it easily accessible, perhaps via a web page or even a smartphone app. And in coordination with this, we also like to start a frequently asked question web page for residents or citizens to access. The next recommendation is to enhance or support existing hotspot enforcement and pursue ongoing funding and grants. Our police department currently have been stepping up enforcement campaigns that emphasize collision hotspots. We want to be able to request funding and seek grants to enhance that program. Next recommendation is to explore the feasibility of administrative tickets for pedestrian safety violations. This recommendation essentially is to use perhaps administrative tickets as a traffic safety education strategy, and maybe for can get this could be drivers or pedestrians. They have an option of paying for or taking a safety class instead of paying a fine. Our police departments already started developing and conducting some education courses, and they've been working with the court system to see how the possibility of such a program. The next one is the increased reach of enforcement efforts through media. We'd like to expand the reach of our current pedestrian safety enforcement efforts through widespread use of media and on campaigns also. As far as education recommendations are concerned, first one is to allocate and secure funding to develop professionally designed educational materials. These materials would provide a single unified brand for use across our own city departments and community groups, as well as across different mediums such as TV, radio, PSAs, and such. This will help better reinforce pedestrian safety messages. I'd like to note that the police department and Ms. Haji Manukian have created 3 PSAs, Tamar?
3 papers.
3 so far PSAs that have been broadcast and used by various community outfits. And they, at the last task force meeting, they represented some materials for branding that we have looked at and provided feedback on. And the next recommendation is to establish a pilot area for an intensive pedestrian safety education campaign. And this came out as a result of our limited sources that the task force recommended an outreach to implement, test, and evaluate pedestrian safety education messages and materials, maybe at a limited group or to a small pilot area at first, and to evaluate its success before expanding it. We also have a recommendation to cultivate community partnership and engage local businesses to broadcast pedestrian safety education messages. The task force have come up with a long list of TV channels, perhaps churches, health centers and hospitals, movie theaters, and our business improvement districts, perhaps Brand Boulevard of Cars, and new and incoming businesses. Last but not least is to allocate and secure funding to develop hands-on education methods, and this will be in-person education in order to reach the target older Armenian adult population. It's my understanding that there have been at least 3 workshops and education, community education meetings, one at the Central Library. I attended the one at ANCA and one at the Adventist Hospital that was very well received and well attended. And our police department staff attend and provide the education on pedestrian safety. With that, the next steps are going to be after the Commission's feedback and hopefully approval of the recommendations. We tentatively have scheduled to take this report to City Council on October 7th of this year. We also intend to have regular follow-up meetings with the members of the Task Force, Pedestrian Safety Task Force, so that we can get together and report on the progress and if there's any issues of concern that we need to resolve to move forward. And also, with that, we'll start implementation of the recommendations. The task force collectively and certain members have generously volunteered to take the lead on all of our tasks that are listed in the attached report to your commission report, and we have given them importance and some tentative timelines for completion and implementation. That said, we'll bring a report back to the Transportation and Parking Commission with our successes, hopefully, and the roadblocks that we have met and how we have overcome them and what we need to do to move forward. With that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
I do have a card. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you real quick, was that flag pilot, was that under engineering?
Yes, that will be. So each of these tasks that I so quickly went over.
Yeah, because I didn't see it up
each task contains some details that the lead person would volunteer to take the lead on that task will implement.
Okay.
And that flag is one of them, as in it may be education, but I've also checked with our city attorney's office, and there are no issues with conducting that effort.
I didn't think there would be. That's very good. Okay, so let me call that. We do have 2 cards on this, but let me call up first Mr. John Kosiemba.
John Kosiemba here. Born and raised in Glendale, 1946. I live in the Pelanconi area, so that's how I certainly know Rubik and Don Sepulveda very well.
Nice.
I'm the representative for the Pelanconi HOA at all the CPU meetings and things like that, so I've been to well over 20 of those, counting the mediations and stuff with the judges and so forth. So that's just one of the reasons why I was here, just to listen to what was going on. The other thing is I've gotten involved with, I do a lot of walking in Glendale now, And I was able to go to one of the open meetings for the, invited to one of the open meetings for the pedestrian safety, and that's a big concern to me, because I walk my dog every day, and I know the problems out there, and I have certain things that didn't make it into the report, so I wanted to throw some of my solutions to it. I walk on the river walk at least 3 times a week, for example, walk the dog there, plus walk the neighborhood. And I'd like to point out that 99.9% of the legal crossings in Glendale do not have any paint on them. Any corner, any single corner is a crossing. The newspapers don't seem to be aware of that. They say, well, the person wasn't in a crosswalk when he gets hit by a car. Doesn't matter. People have to understand that, and that's not being educated here. So I think that really needs to be done. Now, what I've come up with, going to the one meeting, I saw someone suggesting that we have a bucket full of sticks and people wave a flag going across the street. Well, the sticks get lost pretty soon. You know, people just take the sticks or whatever, you know, kids do or whatever. So I developed my own little system here, and I call it a pedestrian safety stick. And I carry this every day. I have different models of it. Basically taking yard flags, or what do you want to call it, flags, attach them to a cane. You carry the cane on your shoulder or wherever. I do this way because I got my dog over here. And when I come to a crossing, it reminds me, okay, I'm going to have to demonstrate this, use this stick to help get across the street, and it does help. I don't use it to stop traffic. I haven't used it to make me more visible when I'm crossing a street. So it makes me, first of all, I'm going to deploy the stick, so it makes me think to look before I step off. And then when I step off, I'm waving this flag. So basically, if someone comes zipping up behind me, that you can't, when you're an old guy, you can't turn all the way around and see a car 2 blocks away coming up from you, and the car is coming this way, they're going to see me. And I literally have had cars slow down when they've come zipping up too fast when I try to cross Concord and things like that. And it's incredible that this really does help. And
That's neat.
it basically costs about 50 cents to add these flags to this stick. You just zip them on there. Take any cane, or I've got other things developed. I've also tried working out adding lights to it. It's going to be used at night, so it costs more money to add the lights to it, though, because you need batteries and power and so forth. So, very good little idea. You carry it across, and you give it to each person that they keep with them. You know, they can use it for a cane, they can use it for helping to deploy, and they can use it for visibility. So this is one thing I wasn't able to get into the open forums or any of these reports, and it's one thing I'm trying to demonstrate. Rubik, you saw me at the night at cruise night. I was showing off my stick, wasn't I? So I'm now a member of Walk by Glendale. I didn't really know anything about it beforehand. I haven't really done anything with the stick with them at this point, but I'd like to just present it to you and just give you an idea of how it works. So.
Well, thank you very much, John.
And as far as the railroad goes, as I said, I'm a principal with that particular thing. I'm a member of the board of our HOA. I'm also the treasurer of the Glendale Coordinating Council for the last 2 years. And as I said, I know Don and Rubik very well from that section too.
Well, thank you very much. I was just going to say, when you came up there with that great idea, I almost felt for a second like I was a panelist on Shark Tank. I was ready to make an offer for you for that great idea. But
some people I showed it, you should go on Shark Tank. And I said, no, less than 50 cents to add
right.
flags to it. You're not going to make a product out of it and sell it on Shark Tank. So.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Mr. Golanyan?
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, members of the Commission, there were a couple of other items that I failed to note in my presentation.
Would anybody like one of these to take with them?
Thank you.
One being our success in applying for and obtaining $500,000 in grant funds through the California Transportation Commission that was approved on August 20th.
I was just going to say that in the comments, Rubik. You beat me to it.
Congratulations. That's going
to
help us immensely to implement some of the recommendations in this report, as well as one of our main goals is, and a very important goal, is to finalize a pedestrian action plan that we have a template for since 2009, and that funding will assist us in hiring a specialized consultant to help us reach there.
Very good. Thank you. Call up Mr. Eric Yasayan.
Mayor Kusayan. Nice to see you guys again. Well, I want to thank, I was part of this process and I was on the task force, and thank you, Mr. Rubik-Galanyan, for all the work you did, and your staff, especially with the limited resources you've had. I think the task force process was good, and the recommendations are something that I was satisfied with. And I really appreciate that you designated leads to all the recommendations and had timelines on when things can be completed. That was something that you don't always see come out of a task force process. So it showed your commitment to make a lot of the recommendations that we did actually happen. So I really appreciate that. There are three things I did want to comment on. First, this sort of came up very late in the task force process, and we never really had a lot of time to talk about it, but if there's still time, I'd like to add it in some way, which is to have or have someone or have a process to look into designating some kind of goals for ourselves as a city of how much we want to reduce pedestrian collisions and deaths in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and how we're going to measure ourselves going forward. Other cities, especially New York City, as big and crazy as they are, they've set goals like this and they've measured themselves, and they've reduced pedestrian fatalities by over 30% in the last 10 years. So I think it's important for us to do that, for ourselves as well. So if that's a line or if it's an overall vision statement that we put on for this, and we come back to it later with the sort of designated goal list, I think that's important to have. One thing that New York and other cities have done is a Vision Zero campaign, stating that we're going to commit as a city to bring down pedestrian deaths to zero. So I've sent material about that, and I could send it to the commission so you guys can review. But I think a bold statement like that coming from the Glendale and from the task force is an important statement to make. Second item is the advanced yield lines. I know we mentioned it and as a recommendation, and I think it's a really good thing. And these are, in case you don't know, these are lines where they support cars from stopping just a little before the crosswalk, so the cars don't sort of creep up all the way to the crosswalk and potentially block pedestrians from walking. I think there's opportunity to beef that language up a little bit in the recommendations to say for all new crosswalks or all new intersections that are restriped, to look into adding these advanced yield lines. Right now it says just additional advanced yield lines, and if we can amend that language a little bit, I think it would be stronger. And the third item is the kind of communication we do going forward. I think the task force is a great place that residents and different stakeholders come together at, and I think when you present this to City Council, we can recognize that this is a body that other city departments and everyone can come to get feedback on different campaigns going forward. And those are my 3 comments.
Good comments. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. What is the next item?
Next item is a presentation only. 7A, look ahead implementation of bicycle facilities as part of the future capital improvement projects.
Mr. Galanyan?
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, members of the Commission, Commissioner Gonzalez, and with agreement with the rest of the commissioners, had requested I bring forward our 3-year capital improvement program to present to your commission that delineates and highlights bicycling facilities that are included in them. We just put this together literally 10 minutes before the commission meeting, so I apologize if there's no. My intention was to have a map to go with it, but if you like, I can send that out to you guys. So the first one that will include Class 2 bicycle lanes projects are Highland Avenue from San Fernando to Glen Oaks, Brand Boulevard from City of LA boundary to San Fernando Road, Riverside Drive from City of Burbank boundary to Western Avenue, Ocean View Boulevard from County of LA boundary to Verdugo Road, Verdugo Boulevard from Verdugo Road to City of La Cañada Flintridge boundary. We also planning on installing sharrows. These will be part of the following projects: Mountain Street from Brand Boulevard to Rossmoyne, Western Avenue from Riverside to Victory, Broadway from San Fernando to Glendale, Monterey from Geneva to Verdugo, Kenneth Road from City of Burbank boundary to Pacific. In addition to these roadway improvement projects, we also have dedicated bicycle transportation plan implementation. A few months ago, we completed phase 1 of that program. We plan on having at least 2 more phases within the next 3 years that would include the following locations: Allen Avenue, San Fernando to Mountain, Justin Avenue, San Fernando to Kenneth, Mountain from our city boundary to Central, Lexington from Kenilworth to Verdugo, Adams Street from our city limit to the northerly terminus, which is south end of Freeway 134, Harvey Drive from Broadway to Holly, Lake Street from the city limit to Davis, Stalker Street from Brand to Mountain, Geneva Street from California to Mountain, Rossmoyne Avenue from Glen Oaks to Mountain, Ethel Street from Rossmoyne to Mountain, California Avenue from Louise to Glendale, Davis Avenue from Garden to Flower. I'd also like to add that we may more than likely be able to combine several of these locations so we get the biggest bang for our bucks, as well as have neighborhood improvements all at the same time. These projects are at varying stages of planning, design. None of them have started construction, but our goal is to start in fiscal year 2014-15, which is just started, but start the actual construction implementation in spring of 2015 and moving forward. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Of course I have questions. I think there was one thing mentioned that I've mentioned in the past, and that is that these improvements are really great, and I think the ones that you've mentioned that I did not know about, I think probably double or triple the existing improvements that we have for bicycling in the city. I think it would be great for the public to have this on some kind of map that's accessible to the public, to identify existing infrastructure and proposed infrastructure so that people know what's coming and can plan accordingly. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, Commissioner Bartuso, we have a map on our website that shows what we have implemented so far, but we will put the proposed ones on there too.
Okay, and thanks for coming back to this slide. Brand Boulevard, I know to San Fernando. I know that there were some issues with the storm grate at the very bottom under the railroad tracks. Do you know how that would be mitigated? Because I know that goes into the bike lane.
Right. Commissioner Bartuso, we have been working with City of Los Angeles and MetroLink on relocating that storm drain. This is part of a larger storm drain and a street improvement project. So that may be one of the projects that we may have to construct 2 years or 3 years out. But it's a complex issue, but we are working with the involved parties to get them resolved.
Thank you. I was under the impression that the work that's happening on Kenyatta Boulevard, that there was going to be sharrows on that after? Or am I
Yes, Commissioner Gonzalez, there.
So I noticed it wasn't showing there.
Right, so these are our proposed projects moving forward, not under construction.
Thank you.
And those are on our website already.
What's a Class 2 bike lane? Class 1 versus Class 3, please?
Alex?
Commissioner Kirkjian, these are different types of bike lanes delineation that could be, you typically see Class 2, I'm sorry, with striped white lane about 5 to 6 feet wide. Then the Class 3 is an enhanced bike route. We also have some colored bike lanes that was noted in our bicycle master plan. So just different types, essentially serving the same purpose.
Width, length, color,
Right.
almost
Striping,
they're all the same? Yeah.
stencil.
Okay.
Question about, I noticed you have Broadway here for sharrows. Doesn't that currently have sharrows from San Fernando to Glendale? I believe, I remember, I thought all of Broadway was already sharrowed.
We recently, or last year, installed sharrows from Glendale, I believe, to Central. Didn't go all the way to San Fernando.
Okay. And then I had one last question about the Riverside bike lane. I thought that it went up to Sonora. So I'm not sure what segment that is that you're referring to for bike lanes. Go back there. Riverside Drive, Burbank to Western.
City of Burbank to Western, yes.
I thought that segment, I think it's just up to Sonora where the bike lane ends.
So I'll have to refer to our bicycle transportation plan.
Okay. We can talk offline too. That's okay.
Is,
I can't read this.
That's okay.
okay, we'll
that's fine.
look at that afterwards. Tamara, what's the next item? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. If you wanted to speak on the subject, we need you to. Well, I'm sorry, sir. We need you to fill out a card to present.
While he's doing that, do we, based on what I read on agenda number 5, I think that staff was looking for a recommendation from the commission? No?
No, I don't believe so. There's no recommendation needed for item 5 on the agenda, Mr. Galanian. Is that just informational?
No, I don't mean 5, I'm sorry. I meant to say 6.
Oh, the report only.
I meant to say 6, I'm sorry.
We can ask that to Mr. Galanian.
Chair Pro Tem, Yakubian, members of the commission, our intention was to provide this as information and receive feedback from the commissioners.
Okay.
So before it goes to city council, you're not wanting a recommendation from this commission?
Yeah, the objective was to get a recommendation or at least feedback before we take it to city council.
I thought I heard you say that at the beginning of your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let me call up Mr. Kosiamba on item number 7. Would you like to make some comments?
Briefly, you're right in my backyard again here when you're crossing Highland Avenue and crossing and so forth in that area going on to Fremont Park. I walk my dog every day there. Highland Avenue is actually pretty wide and it's going to be easy to do mitigation on. But the bigger problem is Concord. another 2 blocks on down. Basically, you got your cars leaving, dropping off their kids at school, zipping down Concord to hit the freeway, the 134 freeway, and it's just crazy. I mean, these cars are just flying. So, I'd like to have, if there's some mitigation that could be done there, I'd appreciate. I think it would be very good and help out a lot.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Galanyan, Commissioner Gonzalez had mentioned his, did you have comments you wanted to make on it? Yeah.
I thought others did, because I kind of sensed it for some reason, but I may have been off on that. But I also wanted to, I guess the answer to your question is yes, I'm sorry.
Can we revisit that item? Okay, so let's do that. And let's revisit item number 6 for commissioner comments.
I would like to get feedback to the notion of the suggestion of a yield line sooner than later that was mentioned by one of the speakers, and what your thoughts were on that, and would that be appropriate to add? Or is it already in the recommendations?
Chair Pro Tem Yacobian, Commissioner Gonzalez, it's already part of the recommendation, but as Mr. Yesayan mentioned, we can just make it a stronger and higher priority. We already have started implementing advanced yield lines with our new roadway projects. So it will just be continuing.
And if Mr. Wayne Coe is listening, I often refer to that as the yield line, but he often corrected me and said it's advanced stop bars. Am I wrong on that, or is that the technical word for that?
It's, tomato, tomato.
Tomato, tomato. Very good. All right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
I also like the fact that, first of all, there are kind of like timeframes noted here. I think that's wonderful, and also commend all the people who worked on this. I mean, this is an extensive effort, and I know it was a very challenging one to go and to come up with this report. I think is very positive.
Was there any other comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bartosov.
Sure. So I also want to thank all the task force members and city staff. I know we've been going at this for a really long time, and it's a monumental task to get to. So I'm glad we're finally here today. I did have some questions about the recommendations, one of them being the high visibility crosswalk policy topic, which is recommendation number 1 under engineering. I've seen the Continental crosswalks here in the city, most notably on Brand Boulevard, where there's mid-block crossings. Is that are those the technical, are the specs for that being looked at for adoption throughout the city, or are there other variations of a Continental crosswalk that you're considering?
We are looking at the existing specs, and as well as others that have been used in other cities. Sometimes they refer to them as ladder crosswalks or continental, and this policy will enable us to set a threshold. So I cannot promise that it will be done for every intersection in the city, but the lead persons will take on that task and bring it back to the task force with where the threshold is for implementation of this.
Okay, I know that I've already offered to city staff some pictures because I work in downtown Los Angeles where these have been implemented. The width and the sheer presence of the Continental crosswalks that the city has adopted there is much, much superior to the ones we have in Glendale. So I think that our neighbors next door have great examples that we can look to. And I would like to offer that as a suggestion, but also to consider the way that they have the Continental crosswalks, they do not incorporate the two long legs of the ladder because that, I think, makes it more visible. So I think that's another thing to consider.
Commissioner Bartusoff, we also have, in recent years, in the last couple of years or so, we have implemented those kinds of crosswalks in the vicinity of schools.
Yes, right, as far as safe routes to school, right. Correct. So I think that's a good model to go off of. I would like to add, since we are asking for feedback from the commission, to make this a citywide policy where, as one of the speakers mentioned, if there is a repave happening or a restripe, that these be implemented all throughout the city. So that's something that I would consider be added to this recommendation. And that also feeds into recommendation number 2, where if we do restripe crosswalks, they are elevated to continental crosswalks and not what the federal government now considers substandard crosswalks, which is just the 2 bars that we see today. Also on item number 3, I do agree with the speaker that advanced yield lines should be included again anytime we're retouching a street or repaving or restriping, that advanced yield lines are included throughout the city. Number 4, I had a question about the hotspots. The hotspots that you're referring to, are those the hotspots that were identified with the task force when they went out during the day? Okay, I am a little bit concerned about that. I know that task force was very limited with time and didn't have much of an opportunity to go out and explore the city. I am a little bit concerned about the 2 intersections that were proposed, but I think that with the other items that were mentioned in the recommendations, one of them does mention that there will be an analysis of some sort to prioritize what will go in. So I want to make sure that the items that come out of these hotspots are not elevated beyond what is going to be found in the analysis that the police department does or Public Works does to identify other intersections that may be more important. I don't know if that came out clearly.
Sophia, I'm not sure if I understand that correctly. Let me clarify something. The 2 particular intersections that I mentioned, as you noted, came out of our walkability assessment, but our effort's not going to be limited to only these 2.
Correct.
We have 3 other reports that identify hotspots.
Oh, got it.
So we will do additional evaluations and separate evaluation analysis of those intersections.
Okay, got it. The other, I think my last comment on the recommendations is enforcement recommendations, number 1. It wasn't clear to me in your comments about whether or not these are the mobile, I know that you mentioned in the second sentence, mobile speed feedback signs that can move around based on our specific needs in the city. Are those in addition to the permanent speed feedback signs, or do you mention both in these recommendations, or am I misunderstanding?
Commissioner Bartusoff, there are 2 types. One are the mobile police department signs that are on trailers. That you can move them from place to place.
Right.
Those cannot be installed on residential streets where we have narrow widths, obviously. So they're primarily used on arterials. We also have signs, digital signs, that we install on posts and street lights, and those are movable also. One I mentioned on Kenyatta has been there for a long time, and it looks like it's permanent.
Right.
But we have 4 of those, and we are planning on purchasing 4 additional ones that we can move around throughout the city.
So those are, in the terminology here, those are considered the mobile speed feedback signs? Okay. Okay. The last clarification that I wanted was you have task 4 in the recommendations, let's see, for engineering, it says implement and finalize the draft pedestrian safety action plan. Is that the same as, does that work with the $500,000 grant that we got, or is that?
Yes, Commissioner Bartusoff.
Okay, okay. So that includes planning and implementation. The grant money?
Grant we received is for planning only.
For planning only, okay. Okay, so just to summarize, I would like to add that continental crosswalks be implemented citywide where they can be when restriped or relooked at, and same with the advanced yield lines as well.
Can that be a different color, the additional advanced yield signs versus the crosswalks? They'll be more flashy with yellow and white perhaps, or?
Commissioner Kirkjian, we follow specs and standards so that it's uniform throughout the state anywhere you go, and we're mandated to follow standards and not deviate from them.
Well, Mr. Golani, I want to thank you for all the workshops you put together, and I was privileged to be part of that, the task force meeting that you put forward. And also I want to thank Mr. Zorvan for his hard work and obtaining the $500,000 grant for our city, and our Police Chief Castro, which I didn't have a chance to meet him yet in person. It was very informative for me, and the bottom line for everything that put together over here, it's great, but the bottom line is education. Many years ago, there was the issue of drunk drivers. Now, DUIs, tickets, everything we hear is much, much less than what it used to, thanks to efforts like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Many years ago, they were there, and that helped quite a bit. I think what we have to do over here is like the hub, a spoke, and a wheel. I mean, if we're the hub, we're trying to create something, has to snowball, and we have to, maybe Ms. Haji Manoukian can communicate what we're doing to other cities, and for what we're doing snowballing bigger into other cities. At the end of the day, if a 3, 4, 5,000 pound object hits a pedestrian, it is, after you're gone, who cares whose fault is it? I mean, whether the attorneys and courts are hashing who's right and who's wrong, if you're dead, you're dead. And that's what we're trying to prevent. And I think education is the most important thing over here. One of the things that was shared with us during our meetings was by our police department. And back in the 80s and 90s, seatbelt was a big issue. Was reported during our meeting was back in 2010, if I recall. Seatbelt usage in California was number 2 behind Washington State at 96%. A decade or two ago, that was a big issue for us. We accomplished that, we got that as a California as a whole, not as a Glendale, by education. I was on the road for 3.5 hours yesterday, flying from Northern California, or Central California rather. There are a lot of those signs. Click it or ticket. Or there was this yellow California signs with something round, and it says, buckle up. That's education. I think what we're doing here is for next generation of seniors, and the seniors today they're being hit and getting killed, it's a moot point for us to try to educate them, because it'll be very difficult for us if seniors on medication, take prescription drugs, or they already have their own way. Plus seniors, I don't say, my father's 90 years old, I don't say, use the word arrogant, but they're set in their own ways. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think we have to educate the next generation of seniors. One of the best ways to do it, I believe, is by contacting these seniors through our kids that are going to school, through PTA meetings, or through poster contests, as it says over here, or parents actively they need to get informed. In sales, there's this law that you have to, until you make 7 contacts, people will not even remember who you are. So after 7 times, maybe they'll remember who you are. The same thing is true over here in this case, where parents during PTA meetings, during the kids, where a pamphlet's going through, they need to be reminded. And even though we spoke about social media, that the city is going to implement that, but that's only for the youngsters. The younger generation is a problem itself, where a lot of youngsters they're on their iPads, texting and walking down crosswalks. They need to be educated as well. I mean, thanks God we haven't had any youngster fatality except for the bike rider on Glendale Boulevard, but that was not texting issue. But those are some of the things I believe we have to do in educating our next generation of seniors, just like seatbelt had worked. So, and having said that, I want to thank everyone who participated and all the groups that came through, which you mentioned earlier, and thank you for the great job.
Commissioner Gonzalez, did you want to add anything else?
I'm good.
I apologize for that slight mix. Obviously, we're so outspoken, our group. I should have thought there was something amiss with that. But yeah, I'll say that in the staff comments. I have something to say. But what is the next item?
Item 8 is commission staff comments and updates.
Mr. Golanian?
Chair Pro Tem Yakubian, members of the Commission, Mr. Yasayan already stole my thunder, but I wanted to mention that on September 11, at the Pacific Edison Community Center, it will be the first of 3 community meetings regarding the Riverwalk crossing, the 3 bridge locations that we're proposing, and the consultant will propose or submit and provide presentation on the options and pros and cons, and to receive feedback from the community if you'd like to attend.
And the meeting starts at 6:30.
At 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. I would like to, again, echo the statements by, or his, thanks by Commissioner Kirkjian to all of those incredible dynamic people that were part of this commission. Eric, it's nice to see you out there, totally pushing us, and extraordinary people in their own right, giving the input. And I couldn't imagine a better task force or accumulation of minds to push it through. Everyone really, the priority was to improve the safety for our city. So it was an honor to be a part of that task force. And as you had already mentioned, you stole my thunder, Mr. Golanian, by telling us about the funding approval. But I did receive an email from Mr. Tony Dang, who's up there, who actually came down to our workshops from Office of Traffic and Safety, to congratulate Glendale again for its citywide pedestrian plan, the funding through active transportation program, and he was very happy and very encouraged to see how we're going to move forward in the future. So just wanted to echo that. Commissioner Bartosoff, would you like to add something?
Sure. I also want to congratulate the city. I was a little bit involved, or not involved, but informed of the ATP process at the statewide level, and I know that this year was extremely competitive. So I consider Glendale very lucky to be the recipient of not 1, but 2, at least. Is it 2 or more that we've received?
Commissioner, first of all, I'd like to, not to contribute it to luck, but our hard work. There were over 700 applications that were submitted statewide. 2 of our applications were successful, one for the implementation of the pedestrian action plan, and the other one, next phase of Safe Route to Schools, right. $1.1 million.
Right. So very happy that that's coming to the city of Glendale. The one thing that I wanted to mention is that I was a little concerned a few weeks ago when I read a Glendale News Press article that quoted a Glendale police officer as saying that 50% of the reason why a pedestrian gets hit in the city is because of the pedestrian. And I was a little bit concerned about this quote because at our very last meeting where we were informed of a study that was done for the city that I specifically and explicitly pointed out at this meeting, was that, in fact, 50% was at the fault of the driver and about 24% was at the fault of the pedestrian, and the rest is miscellaneous things. And one of my commissioners alluded to this, is that we need to be very vigilant in providing accurate information to the public. And that information dictates what we do as a city and how we address certain issues. So part of it's education, part of it is engineering, and we have various target audiences that we need to address. I think that if we have police officers making statements like that, they need to be backed up by data. And I've already informed Tom Lorenz of this. I believe, Mr. Galanyan, you're aware of it. I would like to see that data. Because I want to make sure that when we communicate these things to the public, it's in fact true. And I have yet to see that based on the studies that have come before this commission and studies that I've seen just from my own personal perusal. So that's a concern that I have, and I wanted to make sure that my other commissioners know about that. And I hope that we are able to set the record straight very soon.
Commissioner Bartoshov, I asked the very question that you have during our meetings to our police department, and they were unable to answer the question because ongoing litigation that was going on with several fatalities. Because there are courts involved, they were not able to respond.
Yeah, I mean, that statement comes from knowledge, and I would like that if that officer has that knowledge, that it be shared with the public. So I'm confident that we'll be able to do that, if not soon, then later. But I'm going to expect to see that information at some point.
Again, I agree with you, Commissioner Bartoshov, but if you're hit by a car, you're hit by a car. I mean, it's either, is it driver be aware or pedestrian be aware? In my opinion, pedestrian be aware, because don't get hit. If you get hit, you're done. Who cares what the courts do afterwards?
Commissioner Gonzalez, would you like to end this updates and comments with something cheerful?
Well, let's see. Yes, 2 or 3 things. First of all, any update on Mountain and Second? Nothing, still Caltrans still? Or?
Yeah, what's going on with that?
Gonzalez, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we're still awaiting Caltrans approval.
I thought we got the approval and we're just waiting their implementation.
It was a verbal approval. Mm-hmm. We have submitted the striping plans to them. It's been in their shop. They're notorious for being slow to respond, but we'll try to elevate it to the higher office and see. Hopefully, we can get it implemented.
And then to make your comment about a positive note, the positive note would be, I take it that we are still moving relative to getting some good dialogue on the potential metro bond and where the city, as a city council, would stand on. I know you said you were going to touch base with our city manager on.
I have touched base with our city manager as well as the city council member Najarian, who sits on the metro board, and he's aware of it, and he is working on it. So hopefully at our next meeting, I should be able to provide an update.
Good. Thank you.
That's it? Okay, next item.
Next item is adjournment. If there was a motion.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Very good. Good evening.